But I think the other thing is, so I'm not writing like a Japanese woman. That's not a real thing. Mariko is not the same person as her sister or her mom.
Mm.
She's a cop, so I should spend some time talking to cops. I did spend some time talking to female cops in particular to see what it's like, what their experience is of being a woman in a male-dominated profession, so that I'm gonna, whatever my assumptions were, didn't line up with theirs at all.
We got something special for you today.
A great video. This guy is like, I feel like I could just sit at his feet.
Right, Steve Bein knows story. Definitely knows story.
Story guru.
So this was the first time that we got to sit down and really just talk to a writer about stories, what they think about stories, how they go about crafting it. And it's just a great time, man. I take the trip down to Ohio to see this guy once every 6 months.
All right, I got one big disclaimer. Video work is poo-poo. Forgive us for that. The content is still great.
The content is great.
There's a couple of things that were not in the cameraman or woman's favor. It was the first time. We kind of just threw them in there and said, shoot.
One of the things we were interested in, especially in the climate now in a lot of young adult market, is how do you feel writing about a culture and that you're not a part of, and having a woman protagonist, where it seems like a lot of times now they want people to be that, to write that.
Yeah, I mean, they're right to want that, right? I mean, if you, I mean, that was the oldest writing advice is to write what you know, but if you're writing in science fiction and fantasy, like, none of us know about flying an X-wing or training a dragon, right? Like, so you have to step outside a certain point of what you know. That said, so I guess I'm thinking of a couple of things. In Mariko's case, in the case of these books, I mean, my fascination with Japan started in the 4th grade. So I've been thinking about Japan for a long time. I lived there for a couple of years before I wrote these. I've got a whole bookshelf that's just Japanese history. So when I'm writing the samurai stuff, I'm steeped in that stuff, and I have been for a long time. You know, the other piece of old writing advice is do your homework. So you should talk to the right people, you should be reading the right stuff, watching the right stuff. There are a couple of other things. I mean, one is just be decent and treat people like human beings and not assume that my experience is like where I come from is universal. But I think the other thing is, so I'm not writing like a Japanese woman. That's not a real thing. Mariko is not the same person as her sister or her mom.
Mm.
She's a cop, so I should spend some time talking to cops. I did spend some time talking to female cops in particular to see what it's like, what their experience is of being a woman in a male-dominated profession, so that I'm gonna, whatever my assumptions were, didn't line up with theirs at all. Generally speaking, my experience was that the women who are going into law enforcement are pretty tough and don't really take a lot of BS from the guys they work with anyway. I've got a good friend who's he was a point man on a SWAT team. Now he's a SWAT team commander. Kicking in the door of a crackdown, knowing that there's guys on the other side of the door with a gun, that really doesn't bother him that much. Talking to a 6-year-old about having been abused by her father freaks him right out. He's terrified of it. Cops come, there's a lot, I mean, police work is a really, really broad thing, right? So, like, it turns out that a lot of the cops working with abused children are women, and a lot of the cops kicking down doors as point men in SWAT teams are men. You can't say that's true of every single case, but, you know, when you talk about, like, there's two different kinds of bravery there, right? I mean, I teach for a living that involves a lot of public speaking. So, I mean, the average American is more afraid of public speaking than death.
Is that number one? Is it number one?
Yeah, it's ahead of death, right? So, like, Jerry Seinfeld said, if you're at a funeral, according to the stats, you're better off in the coffin than giving the eulogy. Right? So, like, I mean, I don't see that as bravery. Blood on the table, somebody else's blood, I want no part of it, right? So, like, we can't assume, I mean, the average nurse doesn't think of that as bravery. I think the average college professor doesn't think of public speaking as bravery. What we think of in our own heads, that's not necessarily how it is on the outside, I mean, to other people, right? So if there's one trick to it, I think, is you can make your characters who aren't like you also outsiders. If I don't fit in perfectly well in Japanese culture, okay, but Mariko doesn't have to either, right? And so write about the freaks and geeks, write about the people who will let you have the outside perspective looking in. So I mean, you can do all your homework, you do all your interviews, but also know that you're going to get it wrong. And if some woman in some Japanese police department writes me and says I got all this stuff wrong, I can't get defensive about that. I just say, thank you very much. And
But you said though that you've had some pretty positive responses.
yeah, I have. I mean, the interviews with law enforcement have really come out in the responses that I've been getting. That cops read this and say, "Hey, you get us," which was really, really cool, right?
That's gotta feel good.
Yeah, I was really pleased with that. So like my SWAT team guy, after getting to know him, well, book 2 starts with a SWAT operation because it was going to have to. I got a chance to go with those guys and like shoot guns and throw a flashbang grenade and got to go do some of this fun stuff. So,
Nice little ride along.
Oh, it was great. Yeah. Doing the ride along and like you kind of get to see, like just a really heavy rainstorm is a big police event. Like when the stoplights go out, now you're moving squad cars. When people are sliding on the roads, now you have different calls. Like I wouldn't have thought of that as rain as a thing. I mean, I grew up in Chicago and like. I remember the Bulls championships being a really big police event, right? But you don't think about rain as a police event. Mm-hmm. So you should write what you know, and you should do the research about the stuff that you don't know. But at a certain point, you still have to be free to write the story. I mean, if research can poison the book, it can strangle it. I do know writers who can't finish a book because they have to get the details just right, and I mean, there's a lot of books, right? You can spend all your time researching and not getting the writing done. I think that's kind of poisonous to the process. So at a certain point, you just have to say, look, I've got it as good as I'm going to get it, and I'm just going to move forward.
Ooh. So there you have it, folks. Man, just great. Like, very informative. I really like what Steve had to say about writing characters.
That's stung right there.
Writing characters outside your ethnicity. This is what I think. Like, I think there's a beautiful thing that there's more of a push for people that are that. So like, for instance,
which he actually said, that's how he started, right?
That's how he started, yep.
Which is good. I appreciate that.
Great. So like that push to have black women be able to write black characters or women to write women characters, I think that's great. I don't think people should be scared off from writing characters if you're not that thing. I think the hardest, like Steve said, you just have to connect with the person, treat them like a person. I think too many times when we try to write outside of our race or outside of our sex, we go straight through the stereotypes. You know what I'm saying? Instead of realizing that 90 to 95% of us all have something in common, and those cultural things are like 5% different. We want to go straight to the cultural difference. And those cultural differences are different, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's the way you should go through the stereotype.
Too, right?
Yep, go through the...
I mean, because he's like, so I don't even think you can call it homework. It's like he did a doctoral degree since he was in 4th grade. So it comes out of a general love and appreciation. I think that's part of it too. So his posture towards the culture was not one of where, it's like, let me just do this experiment with this because it's popular.
Right.
But he wanted to write a book.
He was actually a part of the culture.
Exactly. So he came, it was a genuine love and appreciation for it.
That's definitely brilliant. If you are going to write about another culture, spend some time with that culture. Don't just think you can do it from the safety of your living room and your typewriter or wherever you work and from your desk and just think you can maybe go look some stuff up on Google and then all of a sudden you're an expert on Latino issues or you're an expert on Asian issues. Like really go in there, meet some people, talk to them, you know what I'm saying? Let those people read your work.
It's not just culture, but also occupation is one of the things that he spent some time doing ride-alongs, really doing research, deep research. So you can apply that to an ethnic perspective, you can apply that to a vocational perspective, like pretty much every aspect of your book if you're writing outside of your experience, because like he mentioned, I mean, we all have to write outside of our experience, otherwise it'd just be like a day in the life memoir. And there's a place for that, but like if you're writing fiction, it's fiction.
It's fiction. So you want to talk about the book though?
Man,
the book was excellent. Was super impressed.
Man, it was epic.
Very well put together. Skip back and forth between the present and the past to show the history of this sword and how other people wielded it before we get back to Mariko and Kushida. Yeah, I just thought he did a great job with both of those characters and building them out. very anxious to finish the trilogy.
Really builds out his worlds well. The way his mind works, it was very well thought out.
Master world builder. Just master.
Master.
Definitely think I became a better world builder from our conversations and from reading your book. If I could pay you for that service, I would. But instead, I would just
buy your books
and rave about them.
We'll link to his stuff because he thinks deeply about writing. He writes about it. philosophiction.com.
And you can follow him on Twitter at allbeinmyself. BEIN. Don't wanna be.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is like a super controversial topic, so we would definitely like to hear your comments, like to hear what your thoughts are on how Steve handled it specifically, on anything related to this topic. Comment below. We respond to all of our comments. Like the video.
Yes, like or don't like if you don't like.
Or don't like. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell.
Please share, because sharing means you care.
If you haven't learned sharing, I mean, there's a problem. It's part of the problem with the world, I think.
That's part of the problem. Everybody should share. I share.
We should all share.
I share.
You can start today.